Good morning, I'm Dana Taylor, in for Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, September 12th, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, it's been 2 days since conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. What do we know about his assailant? Plus, how are Democrats responding in this tense political moment? And former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro convicted of plotting a coup. Yesterday, in a nighttime news conference, authorities released new video of the suspected shooter of conservative activist Charlie Kirk and implored the public for help identifying him. The video shows the suspect running across a rooftop, jumping off and dropping to the ground just after Kirk was shot at Utah Valley University. 31-year-old Charlie Kirk left behind his wife and 2 young children, ages 1 and 3. The activist was Trump's close political ally, and the president quickly blamed the, quote, radical left, end quote, while announcing Kirk would receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The shooting was captured in graphic detail in video clips that rapidly spread across the internet. Democrats condemned the killing, but party leaders like Virginia Senator Tim Kaine and Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy say Trump has fueled the climate of violence. A moment of silence on Capitol Hill broke down into shouting over guns and blame. I spoke with USA Today chief political correspondent Philip M. Bailey to learn more about how Democrats are addressing this fraught political moment for the party. Hi, Philip. It's good to have you on.
Hey, Dana. How are you?
How have top Democrats responded to the horrific shooting death of Charlie Kirk?
Across the board, you've seen mainstream Democrats, Democratic officials, elected officials, by and large, accept that what happened on September 10th was a tragedy, that whatever people may think of Charlie Kirk's politics, him being a husband and a father, you've seen Democratic leaders say that political violence is unacceptable and condemn it across the board. Further down the rabbit hole, particularly on social media, there are some progressive-minded people and left-leaning voters who have mocked his death and made light of it. But when you look at Democratic members of Congress on Capitol Hill, they've joined their Republican colleagues, and that's former President Barack Obama, that's Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, and even, young Democrats like Maxwell Frost, congressman out of Florida, have all, I think, for the most part, condemned the September 10th assassination.
Philip, is the best move for Democrats right now to simply give supporters of Charlie Kirk a moment to grieve? What struggle are Democrats facing here?
You have seen this emergence this year in particular of blue MAGA, these progressives, whether on social media, who sort of themselves dive into conspiracy theories and use those for their own political means. Leaders in the Democratic Party saying we need to fight fire with fire against Trump and the Republicans on redistricting in different states. There has been this effort by Democrats to say, look, we're going to stand up to Donald Trump and it's going to be an eye for an eye. And I think that has bled over into some of this conversation about Charlie Kirk, the people who are being very flippant about this very serious, and what I think, Dana, is honestly probably the most significant assassination of this early 21st century. There have been other attempts, but Charlie Kirk was, I think, probably the most influential and important young conservative of this era. But I do think you're seeing some people feel uneasy about this.
President Donald Trump has called on Democrats, as you put it, to turn down the political temperature. What's alleged here, and is this a both sides issue?
Well, look, the unfortunate reality is that President Trump, in his own 4-minute speech in the Oval Office on the day that Kirk was killed, he really leaned into all of the more tragic shootings and killings that have happened to his supporters and hasn't mentioned or didn't mention really any of the acts of political violence against Democratic officials. And there have been plenty of those. Just this summer, we saw 2 Democratic state legislators in Minnesota who were assassinated. The attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband is another example. The kidnapping plot against Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. So there are plenty of examples of political violence being put upon Democrats or put upon liberal-minded. So for many folks, Donald Trump will not be the person that they look to in this moment. But the president, who was very close to Charlie Kirk, and I think owes a lot to Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, galvanizing young people to more conservative causes, by not even alluding to or even mentioning that political violence has fallen on everyone in this country, whether you're Democrat or Republican, he will lose even more credibility among his liberal critics who have no, I think, patience for his rhetoric and commentary. I think this watershed moment could be very dangerous for the United States, to be honest.
Gun violence in America, political and otherwise, is rampant. Are there any signs the government is prepared to act?
None. We have seen heinous act after heinous act. There are repeated and just sort of everyday shootings. In fact, the same day that Charlie Kirk was murdered, there was a shooting in Colorado. We've seen mass shootings at synagogues, at churches, at movie theaters. I remember when I was in high school, Columbine occurred. This is something that has been with our country for decades now, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight.
Heated rhetoric is a hallmark of our democracy. In terms of inflammatory rhetoric, where do we stand?
Well, it's not in a good place, and it may never be. And you're right, maybe it never has been. I think with the rise of social media, and this is what's so interesting about Charlie Kirk, is that he is a figure who, in many ways, was created by the rise of social media, right? His traditional Christian values, his sort of telling younger men, hey, embrace traditional masculinity, embrace your traditional role as a husband and a father, get married, have kids. He advertised the Republican Party to a lot of young men, not just as simply a place to get tax cuts, but a place where you can really lean into your faith. At the same time, he also made a lot of incendiary comments that I think, whether online or in college campuses, that sort of poked liberals in the eye. And rather than responding with rhetoric and sort of fighting him in debates, this assassination, which we still don't know the motivation, that's the scary part for a lot of young conservatives, and I think for a lot of conservatives, period. They, from my conversations, are shocked. They are worried. And unfortunately, many of them on social media, lawmakers included, are saying that, look, they see this as a declaration of war. America's got some soul searching to do. We may be a broken democracy at this point. And I think that there are many folks who are wondering if we can pull it back.
Philip Bailey is a chief political correspondent for USA Today. Good to have your voice on this, Philip.
Dana, as always, thank you.
Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro was convicted yesterday by the nation's Supreme Court of plotting a coup to stay in power after losing the 2022 election. He has now been sentenced to 27 years in prison. This is a major blow to the populist far-right movement he built. So far, 3 judges have found him guilty of 5 crimes, including taking part in an armed criminal organization, attempting to abolish democracy, organizing a coup, and damaging government property. The ruling is historic. Bolsonaro is the first former Brazilian head of state tried for attempting to overthrow the government. It also echoes legal reckonings for other far-right leaders this year, from France's Marine Le Pen to the Philippines' Rodrigo Duterte. The verdict is likely to further inflame Bolsonaro's ally, U.S. President Donald Trump, who has called the case a, quote, witch hunt, end quote, and has retaliated with tariffs, sanctions, and visa bans targeting Brazil's high court. After more than 20 years of litigation, a federal judge in New York is allowing a lawsuit to move forward against Saudi Arabia over possible involvement in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Nearly 3,000 people were killed that day. U.S. District Judge George Daniels ruled that lawyers for the kingdom failed to explain key evidence, including a Saudi official in San Diego who helped 2 hijackers find an apartment and was later found with a video of Washington landmarks and a drawing calculating how a plane could reach a target. Families of victims say the evidence proves Saudi officials aided the hijackers. However, the kingdom insists the connections were coincidental and not directed by its government. The lawsuit only became possible after Congress passed a law in 2016 allowing foreign governments to be sued in U.S. courts for terrorism. For the families, this ruling is about truth as much as damages. Mary Garrity, whose husband, Battalion Chief Edward Garrity, died attempting to rescue people from the towers, said, quote, "Until I take my last breath, I will be fighting for justice, end quote. The fallout of 9/11 continues to affect both victims of the attack and first responders. Many of them are still battling illnesses tied to that day, and they say the very program meant to help them is faltering. Reporter Nancy Cutler of LOHUD.com, part of the USA Today network, has been looking into the struggles of the World Trade Center Health Program, from staffing shortages to delays in expanding coverage. Nancy, thank you for coming on The Excerpt.
Thank you for having me.
What startled me the most in your story was the stark statistic that more 9/11 responders have died from toxin exposure from the wreckage than those who died in the actual attacks on New York, D.C., and Pennsylvania. You spoke with first responders who've been severely affected by these toxins. What did they share with you?
I spoke with Rich Volpe, who's a retired NYPD detective. He is among the group of responders who believes his illness is tied to his exposures at Ground Zero, but they haven't officially been ruled to be part of the World Trade Center Health Program and the James Zadroga Act compensation. So what that means for him is that he isn't getting the kind of support that he believes that he's entitled to for suffering this rare autoimmune disease.
After the attacks, the World Trade Center Health Program was established to help those physically affected by the attacks. However, it's a small program and relies on bigger health departments like the CDC. Tell us about the concerns people you spoke with have regarding the program's ability to operate, or their worries it will shrink or even shut down and make cuts to the Health and Human Services Department.
Yeah. So the World Trade Center Health Program is small, but it is mandated by Congress to operate. The issue that has arisen from HHS is that ongoing cuts, first through DOJ and then through Secretary Kennedy, have cut the CDC, another group called NIOSH. These are all support systems for doing the research, the grant writing, some of the testing of things that the World Trade Center Health Program needs. And although cuts to the Health Center Program directly had been restored, the other agencies that WTC Health Program relies on have not. And there has been a lot of people leaving with all of the kind of confusion around working for HHS right now. And that has been a real concern for the 9/11 advocates. On top of that, ongoing communication among advocates and WTC Health has just stopped this throughout 2025. So they're concerned that they don't even know the risks of these studies not being done, of people getting health care in timely ways. They're confused by that.
I know that there have been concerns about an information blackout. What is going on there, and how has HHS responded to the accusations?
Well, HHS has told me there is no blackout, but 9/11 health groups have been very clear that they had monthly meetings since 2011 when Congress established through the Zadroga Act, the World Trade Center Health Program, and that these have not been taking place. So when they seek information, they say they're not getting a response.
Nancy, what's next for the program and those that rely on it?
Well, there is continued funding issues with this program. As you mentioned before, more people have died from 9/11 exposures than there were killed on that day. The enrollment is about 50,000 more each year. So the financial plans really didn't hold up to the demand. Senator Gillibrand and others re-upped a call to change the funding structure so there would be more funding for the World Health Center program going forward. And the 9/11 advocates are hoping that they can reestablish some of that communication that has been so valuable so they can understand what's happening with the program, what illnesses are being considered for coverage, etc.
Nancy Cutler is a reporter for LOHUD.com, part of the USA Today network. Thanks for being on The Excerpt, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio. If you use a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor, filling in for Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.